1971's Dracula vs Frankenstein sees us once again taking a deep dive into the sick, strange world of filmmaker extraordinaire Al Adamson. Quite honestly, after catching Carnival Magic last season, I almost immediately pre-ordered Severin's recent re-release of this film alongside a Blu-ray upgrade of Carnival because, Jesus Christ, Al didn't mess around when it came to making strange pictures. And this is more than a solid entry in his oeuvre for strange cinema. The film was initially shot through late 1969 and early 1970, and was seemingly originally intended to be a sequel to another Al Adamson movie, 1969's Satan's Sadists. In fact, production got as far as a fully written script, the return of most of the cast of Satan's Sadists, and even early filming before Al decided on a change of direction. The original plot of the film was to concern a young woman who worked as a performer taking on an investigation to try and find her lost sister, leading her into a world of drug-addled hippies and the Satan's Sadists. But just as filming started, Al got an idea and decided to upend the film, moving it away from a grimy exploitation flick to a horror film instead, with the elements they'd already filmed bolted on for good measure. The decision probably came about as a result of accessibility. If I were to speculate, Al was able to negotiate with the folks who owned the original lab props for the 1931 version of Frankenstein to use their props in a movie. Around this time, he also managed to negotiate himself into a position where Lon Cheyney Jr. and J. Carrol Naish were both interested in appearing in one of his films. It would also turn out to be one of the last things they ever did on screen, which is wow. But the thing is, time was against him and he didn't want to can the footage he'd shot with Satan's Sadists. So, he removed some of the more plot-specific footage that they'd captured and just reframed the narrative. He shot new footage around the existing stuff, and it's great because in the background of quite a few shots in this film you can actually see the cast of Satan's Sadists just kind of mooching about, because in the original version they were relevant, but Al didn't want to do reshoots. So, what exactly is this monster mash of a movie all about? Well, the film opens in a cemetery at night as we see none other than Count Dracula himself exhume the body of the original Frankenstein's monster. A gravedigger tries to intervene but meets a bloody ending. We then cut to a young woman at a fairground based on a pier. She leaves the fair and wanders below the dock where a mist slowly rolls in. She quite quickly gets lost in the mist when, out of nowhere, an axe-wielding maniac emerges and full-on decapitates her. The film then hard cuts again into a Ray Dennis Steckler movie, as we head to Las Vegas and are introduced to Judith Fontaine, a cabaret performer who's just received a telegram from the police informing her that her sister, Joni, still hasn't been located. Judith has a meeting with the police, who try to reassure her that she'll turn up eventually, but Judith's not convinced and begins to wonder if she'll have better luck in finding her herself. We then cut back to the fairground, where hippie chick Samantha and her fella are hanging around looking for some fun, which they find in the form of Dr. Duria's Creature Emporium, supposedly a combination freak show and haunted house where Dr. Duria showcases up to 11 creatures that will terrify and astonish. The tour almost always ends with the Doctor appearing to talk to anyone who decides to give it a spin. Samantha and co aren't exactly thrilled by the ride though, and decide to head home after experiencing yawn-worthy terrors to plan for a big hippie protest that's coming up. And it's here that we kind of find out what the plot of the movie's actually about. Sort of. Because it's revealed that Dr. Duria's Creature Emporium is actually a front for a secret underground lair in which the Doctor performs mad experiments on unwilling victims. It's implied that they used to use the Creature Emporium itself to just straight up kidnap unsuspecting women who went into the attraction alone. But now, instead, the Doctor uses his mute, ultra-strong, mentally underdeveloped manservant Groton to fetch him test subjects. The ruse is simple. Groton requires injections in order to stay fairly docile, otherwise he's an axe-wielding maniac. The Doc basically just releases him onto the beach at night to catch any woman or couples who are about, he decapitates them and then takes them back to the Doc for his experiments. Not a lot is revealed about the Doc's work, but there's apparently 2 experiments going on. One is an attempt to resurrect these decapitated people, and the other is a bit more complicated. You see, apparently when someone is in a heightened sense of fear or sadness, their body produces a compound which gives them some kind of super ability that isn't really specified. The Doctor basically wants to harvest the blood of those bodies he's resurrecting and synthesize it into a serum that can be used to cure afflictions and give people briefly super abilities. He's been promising Groton a full cure to his mute, axe-wielding tendencies as soon as he's able to develop enough of the serum for it to be more mass-produced, as at this point he can only really generate about enough to keep Groton docile during the day. And it's here that suddenly Count Dracula returns again, basically outing Dr. Duria as hiding under a false name. He is in fact none other than the last descendant of Dr. Frankenstein. He basically presents Frankenstein with an ultimatum. He's brought the recovered monster body to Frankenstein's lab, and he wants the Doctor to resurrect it and to provide Dracula with some of the blood serum, as apparently it'll make him invincible. In return, Dracula will use the creature and his own terrifying vampiric powers to kill Dr. Frankenstein's enemies, doctors who ridiculed him and forced him out of the medical profession and into the basement of the hokey freak show attraction. Frankenstein accepts, we see the creature resurrected, and he does not look well. Not that that really matters at this point, because around the same time, Judith comes back into the picture, and she's arrived at the beach looking for her sister. She goes into some kind of alternative skinhead hippie bar while a huge protest is going on, and after asking a few questions, one of the biker skinheads becomes convinced that she's a cop and spikes a drink. This causes her to freak out in the middle of the dance floor, and she's eventually found by Samantha and her fella, who calm her down and try to carry her back to a friend's house to recover. And while all that's going on, Groton heads out to the beach with his chopper once again to do some hacking on a young couple looking to get lucky on the sands. Honestly, this film's so scattershot it's really unreal. And from here, well, the film kinda just fires off in every possible direction. Dracula and Frankenstein more or less disappear for most of the runtime, only appearing in very quick cutaways to remind the audience that they're even in this movie, in one or two very brief scenes where they take out the doctors who badmouth Frankenstein. While Judith is introduced to free spirit Mike, who slowly tries to help introduce her to the hippie scene, and between them they begin to trace Joni's footsteps back to the Creature Emporium, just in time for an unholy showdown between the monsters, mad doctors and more. In a 90-minute battle for the ages, will Judith find Joni? Will Groton get his mind back? And will the movie actually remember that this is supposed to be Dracula vs Frankenstein, not here's a mad doctor story with a bit of a murder mystery thrown in for 70 minutes, oh yeah, and Dracula and Frankenstein are in this for a bit near the beginning and end? Well, all this and more will be answered if you check out Dracula vs Frankenstein. And if you like Godfrey Ho movies, man oh man, you are in luck here, because this thing feels like two different films fell into a blender and the results are bizarre to say the least. For the most part, both separate films, the Mad Doctor working with Drac and Frankenstein and the plot of The Missing Sister, played totally separately. They only really bump into each other once or twice across the full runtime, before finally overlapping in the third act more fully, which I assume is down to the fact that Al hadn't filmed anything for the final act by the time the decision was made to change it all up, so they had the scope to rework the script to make it more tied together. As you can probably imagine, the script on this thing is totally uneven, both in terms of pacing and in tone. It has way too many plot threads going on at any one time, and frequently flip-flops around between its many, many threads on an almost scene-by-scene basis. The horror side of things is pretty nonsensical. To me, it reminded me of the old Poverty Row monster flicks of the 40s, just in terms of how the action's paced, how the sets are constructed, how underdeveloped the cast are, and even some of the cinematic choices. It looks cheap, but to a modern viewer who's aware of Poverty Row cinema, I could easily see this being taken on almost like a throwback film. An exploitation film with 70s sensibilities trying to put those values into the mould of an old 40s monster movie. Which is a pretty neat and fun little idea in my opinion. And despite its tonal inconsistencies, its bizarre plotting and near totally underwhelming monster experience, when viewed as a throwback flick, I actually kind of enjoyed it. It's goofy, and I have a lot of time for goofy. Contrasting that, the Judith missing sister plotline is a little grimy and gritty, has a slow burn pace that takes up a good 2/3 of the runtime, and is pretty tonally consistent throughout. It only really goes off the rails in the last act when it overlaps with the zany throwaway horror side of the film, which, I get why they did it, but it ultimately leads to a bit of a disappointing ending that takes the worst elements from both films, the slow burn pacing of the drama side and the inconsistent cheapness of the horror side, and smashes them together into what I could best describe as a yawn-worthy finale. There is an act structuring present in this, but it's been totally crushed out of shape by melding these two types of film into a single production. As such, we end up having a situation where the third act elements start happening in the middle of the second act, and in some cases, because there's two different stories being told, we find ourselves in a place where the film has two second act starting points and two third act starting points. It's just a mess and really confusing when you're trying to bookmark the act shifts, which are not clear at all. The dialogue's stocky and feels very much on the fly. There wasn't really any moments that stood out to me, it's fairly melodramatic stuff, but there wasn't anything here that hit me over the head and made me go, what on earth was that? It basically hams it up, says what it needs to say, and then gets the hell out of there. The end result is a script that feels incredibly bold about what it wants to do, but has no idea how to actually do it. It's incredibly inconsistent, seemingly feels largely written in an aimless state, and just gave me vibes of a rush job that was salvaged in the edit rather than intentionally planned. If you want an idea of how free and loose this thing got from a scripting perspective, when filming wrapped they realised that despite the film being called Dracula vs Frankenstein, they'd actually forgotten to include a scene where Dracula and Frankenstein fight. So they basically had to just rewrite the ending in a rush, get the actress who played Judith back in alongside the actor who played Dracula, and they just completely reshot the end of the movie to cram a fight scene in there. The original ending tied things up fairly nicely, even if it was a little underwhelming, but this thing, it pisses on the characters we've sat along for the ride with for the last 90 minutes and ends with a total sense of nothingness. And while I appreciate why they did what they did, I couldn't help but feel there must have been a better way to do this. The script was written by William Pugsley and Samuel M. Sherman. Pugsley has 2 writing credits, this movie and an episode of the 60s TV show 77 Sunset Strip. And that's about it. As for Samuel, he was more of a producer than a writer, with 33 producer credits to his name, but as a writer he had 14 credits, mainly titles that Al had directed. He was also the person Al went to when they needed to rewrite the end of the film. Samuel rewrote the script to what we ended up seeing in the final cut, and I believe he was also the person who directed the ending as well, as Al was busy on other things. We've already covered in depth the career of Al Adamson during our review of Carnival Magic, but I did omit one piece of information that I feel is, well, quite important. In my review of Carnival Magic I mentioned that Al passed away in 1995, but I didn't mention how he passed away. Because, you see, Al was murdered. For a number of years he'd had a living contractor who was in the process of gutting and refitting his home in California. The aim was, once the work was done, Al was going to flip it and find somewhere nicer. However, Al had given the contractor a credit card to purchase supplies to help with the refit, and the contractor very quickly started abusing that, overcharging massively and buying himself nice things. Adamson had several confrontations with the contractor over the misuse of the card until, in a final confrontation, the contractor killed Al and buried him under a patio. It was only when Al's housekeeper became suspicious over his disappearance and the fact that Al's hot tub had been removed that she contacted the police and the contractor was arrested and charged with murder. It's honestly just so tragic, really. On the whole, as I mentioned earlier, the direction for this thing reeks of Poverty Row influencing. Seriously, turn the colour down on your TV and you'd be watching something that, barring the hippie side of things, wouldn't feel that out of place in that era of filmmaking. While some of the more typical influences of Adamson's directing style are present here, wide flat profile shots, floodlit scenes, strange and minimalist attempts at stylisation, Because of how the film has been hacked together, it's kind of left the whole thing feeling a little adrift in terms of cohesiveness. Yes, the scenes themselves seem to be fairly well in tandem, the cam ops seem to be working with the cast and lighting to try and get the best product they can get given the budget and scope, but it all feels very rushed, very one take and done, and in regards to post-production, it's a nightmare. Adamson does seem to have done a little bit of work with the cast, however, in terms of guiding them through the scenes, explaining their marks and motivations. Though I do rather get the feeling a lot of the more creative opportunities for the cast to shine were curtailed due to budgetary issues. This very much strikes me as a film where a tight leash was kept over the production, and that while there was maybe a tiny bit of wiggle room for experimentation depending on schedules, it was more or less a just say your line, exit here, cut and move on kind of production. Same goes for the Cine really. At the point in time when this film was being shot, the style with which it was being shot as wasn't even considered retro, it was considered prehistoric. It's largely filmed in the old theatrical style. Basically, they have a 2 or 3 wall set, actors walk into the frame, talk almost directly down the barrel of the camera lens, sometimes they move around that set space, and then they exit stage left or right. While here they at least do have a couple of cutaways to throw in, and the location work is a bit less theatrical and a bit more cinematic, it's pretty unavoidable that this thing looked dated even at the time it was released, let alone in the year of our Lord 2024. Still, there is at least some attempts at breaking the mould here and there. Coloured lighting is used sparingly in places to help create a sense of unease. They use overlay shots in places to create something approaching rudimentary special effects, and the scenes themselves aren't too badly edited together, even if the consistent lack of B-roll and cutaway material does lead to a bit of a dry experience in terms of sequence structuring. By late 60s and early 70s standards, this is not a particularly strong visual piece, and given just how many elements of 30s and 40s cinema are present in this thing, I find it kinda hard to believe that they weren't aiming to try and replicate that old style of filmmaking, but maybe with a late 60s twist to it. Performance-wise, it's stilted melodrama from tail to snout. Everyone here is awkward, struggling to remember their lines, and largely just seems to be getting through things as best as they can. J. Carrol Naish was incredibly frail by the time filming began on this project. He couldn't remember his lines, so had to have cue cards for the majority of filming, and he only had one eye which was in decline, so it had to be large print held as close as possible, meaning most of his speaking parts had to be shot as close-up and head and shoulder shots because it was the only way he could read his lines. He rumbles through things, but it's clear to me that the guy should have been retired years ago because he clearly looks in a bad way for most of the movie's runtime. Lon Cheyney Jr. as well is clearly worse for wear across most of the runtime. Being mute, there's not much to worry about in terms of delivery, but physically he looks heaving and sweaty for the majority of the runtime. Either he's giving the performance of his career, or he genuinely didn't seem to know where he was or what he was doing and was suffering from the effects of alcoholism for most of the film's runtime. Much like Naish, it was clear to me that the guy really should have been in a hospital rather than painfully wheezing his way through the dregs of an Al Adamson flick looking for booze money. Both of them reminded me very much of Martin Landau's take on Bela Lugosi and Ed Wood, particularly the scene where he laments the fact that he turned down playing Frankenstein in 1931. These were actors who, in their day, starred in some of horror's most beloved productions. Naish won 2 Oscars for God's sake, and here they are, quite literally in the last 12 to 18 months of their lives, barely scraping enough change together from this production to pay for the bus fare home. It's arguably one of the more depressing aspects of this film, honestly. Outside of the big hitters, Regina Carroll is back again as Judith Fontaine, and she's decent enough. I kinda have a soft spot for her style of performing, as she's able to play polite but firm really well. And I think Adamson knew this, as a lot of her roles tend to be characters who are polite and pretty easygoing, but ones you wouldn't want to mess with. I think she's actually pretty solid here and really helps keep the momentum of the thing going well after the steam should have run out. I also have to give credit to Zandor Vorkov for his interpretation of Dracula. While probably one of the least action-packed Dracula takes I've seen in a while, he does have a decent presence of menace about him. He purposefully plays the part with a low level of animation, which he then contrasts with a decent bolt of energy here and there when he needs to showcase a bit more action. I think he's quite solid. I just wish he'd had more to do, honestly, because as it stands, other than his involvement in the first act and his reappearance in the third, he only really shows up in the 50 or so minute middle of the film to wreck up cars and doctors with Frankenstein for a couple of minutes or so, or in a literal blink and you'll miss it B-roll shot. He's very underused, as is Frankenstein, and I think had they either planned to include them in the film initially, or just made the Satan Sadist sequel and then made Dracula vs Frankenstein as its own dedicated picture, it probably would have really let these guys shine a lot more than they ultimately did. The rest of the cast just kind of underwhelm, if I'm being honest. Frankenstein has basically no on-screen time to do anything other than awkwardly hobble about, the supporting cast are super dry and don't really bring a lot to the table, and a lot of the action is held off until the third act, by which point the vast majority of people would be willing to take anything as long as it isn't Judith and Mike walking along a seashore one more time. They're not awful, but in some ways unremarkable is worse. And finally, the soundtrack. And it's a strange mix of the cheapest and laziest sounding late 60s, early 70s rock you can imagine, married up to literal tracks used for the 1930s and 40s Universal monster movies. In particular, a few tracks from The Creature from the Black Lagoon make an appearance. But there's almost certainly other monster movie scores in there too. And when I say the rock is cheap and lazy, I mean laughably so. Like, if it were just instrumentals, I'd probably kind of shrugged it off as generic but workable. But these tracks have lyrics, and they're just so awkward and odd. Honestly, there are moments here where a beer exited my body through my nose for just how awkward and hilarious these tracks were. It's terrible. Dracula vs Frankenstein played the drive-in circuit through the early 70s and eventually faded into obscurity. It did, however, get resurrected in 1982, apparently as part of a quintuple bill run titled 5 Deranged Films, where it played alongside the likes of the Corpse Grinders and the Wizard of Gore under the title They're Coming to Get You. It was released in the UK by Rainbow Video. I'm struggling to find an exact year for the release, but it's a pre-cert, so I'd hazard a guess as it being sometime between 80 and 81. It's also cut by about 3 to 4 minutes, though I'm not sure what exactly has been chopped out given just how tame this movie really is. Beyond that, it had a few bootleg releases in Europe on DVD, but nothing official that I can see. Its first official digital release came in 2020 as part of Severin Films' Al Adamson Masterpiece Collection. As of 2022, however, it's also been released as a standalone, paired up with another Al Adamson masterpiece, Brain of Blood. The extras are pretty solid. You have an archive commentary with Samuel Sherman, interviews with Zandor Vorkov and John Bloom, the actor who played Frankenstein, alongside theatrical radio and television trailers and much more. The picture quality is superb given the materials, this is easily the best this thing has ever looked, and it's all packaged in a very nice slipcover set that also includes the film's full soundtrack on a separate bonus CD. It's a really nice package, and at its current price, I think it's one that I can recommend for oddity fans. This review may have sounded a little down on Dracula vs Frankenstein, but that's simply because it is a seriously flawed production. What I will say, however, is I personally enjoyed this one. I'm not going to lie and say it's amazing, because it absolutely isn't, but as someone who really enjoys flawed productions, it's clear to see that Al's heart was very much in this. And despite it being a sloppy, mismanaged mess of a movie, that heart shines through, resulting in a film that I found to be goofy, enjoyable, and most importantly, fun. I absolutely won't recommend this to anyone who doesn't enjoy cheesy movies, or anyone who doesn't have an intrinsic love for this particular brand of fractured cinema. But if you have a soft spot for Poverty Row filmmaking, enjoy cinema that hyper-focuses on inanities, or you just enjoy films that really don't take themselves too seriously, then this thing's a hoot, and definitely worth your time.